And Assemblyman Matt Simpson joins us now. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Oh, good to see you. Glad to be here.
Let's start with your thoughts on the governor's budget. Are there proposals and spending in there that you applaud and you do support, that you like?
I do. I think the governor, and I had applauded her after she presented that, she really nailed the issues. It is an increase in spending. That is very concerning at a time when we're facing a deficit, and even greater deficits over the next several budgets. But you know, we definitely have issues that we need to address in New York, and she definitely highlighted them.
Let me talk a little bit about the spending increase you just mentioned, about a 5% increase in spending. She is promising to hold the line on raising taxes to raise new revenue for that increased spending. But in your opinion, is there too much spending in this budget?
There's absolutely too much spending. You know, I like to tell people that there are two groups, the bookends of our culture that we need to take care of. It's our seniors, and it's those that are less fortunate that need a hand up. Everything else in between, you know, we can work and we can debate and we can have the floor fights, but those two groups are the ones that we need to focus on and prioritize in our budget. You
mentioned the budget deficit. She didn't talk at all about budget cuts or the state having to tighten its belt given the deficit. Are you disappointed that she didn't do more of that she didn't say, look, we have a $4.5 billion deficit we have to deal with?
I don't think there's anybody that hasn't had to cut their budget, you know, with the rising inflation. So we've all had to tighten our belts. It's time the New York State tightens its belt.
Do you wish she had touched a little more on the out-migration? That's
Absolutely.
Obviously a concern of you and many of the Republicans.
Well, there's a lot of things that were left out of the budget, which is really what concerns me. What's causing the out-migration? And, you know, while the governor has appropriated and highlighted several proposals, you know, appropriating lots of money, hundreds of millions of dollars towards, you know, I'll call it patching a hole. We're not doing enough to address the issues, the underlying issues that are creating that situation, such as affordable housing. The issue is, why is it that we're uncompetitive? Why is it that there's other states where the housing is less? Why is it that our businesses and our manufacturing are moving to other states where it's less costly? It's because of our high cost of living that's created by too much government, too much spending in the budget. And that's where I'm disappointed that the governor did not highlight any of those issues or even mention an initiative to address any of those issues.
You talk about her housing plan. She has dialed that back a bit. She dropped the mandate that the communities and counties have to have a certain percentage of new housing. It sounds as if she's now going to use incentives to try to get communities to come on board. What about in the 114th district? Is it the need for affordable housing, or is it more for housing stock so that people can come in and live in the area and take jobs that are available in the area?
Well, you know, it's both. You know, affordable housing for a workforce is certainly an issue in a more populated area where there may be businesses. My community, it's more the costs have just risen so dramatically that people are finding themselves priced right out of their own community.
The governor is calling for more mental health services, especially in our schools, clinics in schools, and in rural communities. During her budget presentation in Lake Placid last week, she talked about the need for more mental health services in small rural counties. She used Essex County as the example, saying there's only one mental health counselor to every 600 people in Essex County. Is that encouraging that she's addressing mental health needs right now?
I'm very pleased, because that is an issue not just here in the rural part of the state. It looks a little different in the more populated areas, but really we need to expand mental health services and resources throughout the entire state.
The governor is proposing record spending for education, an $850 million increase, spending $35.3 billion overall, which is a record. But the governor says those huge spending increases for education in recent years, full funding for foundation aid, all that money coming in after COVID won't be continuing, that the increases won't be as large as they have been. And that is a concern that you're going to, one, you're going to rework the funding formula, and two, school districts may be seeing cuts in the coming year.
So the last few years, meeting with the school superintendents, you know, they made me aware of the concern over when these COVID funds are going to go away, when they disappear. You know, this is, I think even local government, everybody was flush with money during COVID. Between the reduction of the COVID funding that's gone away, as well as the change in the full foundation formula, that schools are relying on for their programs that are going to result in a significant cut to most small rural school districts. And I'm not happy about that. We've all advocated for a change in the formula that's used to assess each community or each school district, but this isn't what we were asking for. And that formula was meant to make up for the different demographics and economic issues in those districts. And in this proposed change, our school districts are going to see significant cuts in their funding, some as high as 50%. One community in my district is looking at a 50% reduction in their funding. Most of them are all between the low 20% to as high as 36 to 39%.
And you're hearing from the school districts that are looking at the cuts.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's one thing to talk about how New York State has supported education. We've got the highest cost per pupil in the country. And we take pride in the fact that we do a very good job at educating our children. But then to propose a cut after so much work to get to where we should have been just to be competitive, be where we needed to be, it just doesn't make sense.
So will you oppose
Absolutely.
the cuts?
No, we're working on that right now. I mean, we need that foundation formula to correctly reflect the need in each school district. And this is on the heels of the mandates of EV buses and the infrastructure that's connected to providing the energy to those buses. That's a huge cost to every single district. Let
me ask you about that. By 2027, all the new buses being purchased are supposed to be electric buses. A number of school districts, probably in your district, haven't even purchased their first electric bus yet. They're looking at the cost for the buses being about 3 times what diesel buses are. They need the infrastructure. They need garages to put them in. Are school districts reaching out to you saying, there's no way we're going to be able to meet this mandate?
They sure are, and they're not going to be able to meet this mandate. We're hoping that the governor and the legislature agrees that we need to pause this until we have the information we need. I mean, school districts, they've had to go out and hire engineers and find people that can say, okay, this is what we need to do. It's upgrading the infrastructure coming into the school property, which is not going to be borne by the energy provider. It's going to be borne by the school district. It's in the millions and millions of dollars. I've spoken to one superintendent, and it was just astronomical. And that's not even considering all of the other costs, the building, the charging stations. There are a lot of hidden costs that haven't been explored. With all that, you still have to figure out how many buses you need, because they're not going to run as many miles on a charge in a rural North Country school district. We all know how cold it gets here, the snow, the ice. It's really an issue that concerns me.
We were talking a little bit about the governor's housing proposal. One of the things she mentioned is her willingness to use former state sites for housing. She talked about $500 million to create up to 15,000 new homes on former state sites and even closed prisons. Is that something that folks in Mariah may be looking at? In Mineville, Mariah, Port Henry may be looking at that and saying that could be a good use for Mariah Shock, which was just closed a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think I would like to back it up to, you know, when the state decided to close that prison, we should have had a reuse plan, a repurpose plan. How are we going to deal with this, you know, facility being shuttered and the effect that it's going to have on the community? So I would be supportive of a reuse, and I think Mariah and Essex County would certainly welcome a positive use of that building, something that actually benefits New Yorkers rather than sitting there shuttered, which we've seen in many other facilities. Mariah is actually being maintained. It's being, you know, capped at its current state. Yeah. And of all the prison sites or facilities that I've seen, this one is unique because of its condition. It's been well taken care of and it's relatively new, but it doesn't have those trademark telltale signs of a correctional facility, which I think that just presents a great opportunity for New York State to reuse that property.
It's unique also that it's in the Adirondack Park, and
Correct.
Does that present a problem? Would you have to get a constitutional amendment passed to be able to reuse that for housing, and could that potentially kill that project or delay it so long that other sites would be considered?
I've been involved with a constitutional amendment, and the work is just incredible, and there's no guarantee that you're going to reach the people and get them to a level of understanding why it's needed here in the Adirondack Park.
Is there any way to get around it that you wouldn't need a constitutional amendment?
Well, there are options. A state agency could use that facility. I believe, it has to be a benefit to the park, but there are opportunities that we should explore.
Governor Hochul's budget does include language that would allow her to close up to 5 more prisons. 2 of them are in the 114th District in Washington County.
Yes.
And one of them has already been mentioned as a possible target, Great Meadow. So that must be a concern to you that these prisons could be on the chopping block once again.
It's very much a concern. There are many people in my district that are employed by those facilities. And over the years, New York State, with their changes in the criminal justice reform, has created this problem. And, the HALT bill is another one that has created this situation where there just isn't enough staff. There are COs there, corrections officers, that they're expecting to work 8 hours that day. And then 16 hours later, they're still there because they're required to stay there until somebody shows up. So there's not enough staff to cover all the shifts. It's a massive amount of overtime. It's hard on those families of the corrections officers who are under an immense amount of stress in that job. And I don't think anybody realizes and understands how much stress actions by the legislature and the push for policy change has affected those corrections officers and their families.
The HALT Act basically eliminating solitary confinement.
Correct.
And you, Assemblyman Jones, here in the North Country, Senator Steck, a number of lawmakers working to try to get that repealed.
Yeah, I actually carry the repeal HALT bill in the Assembly, and we're still pushing it, and it needs to happen.
Matt Simpson, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.